Hello, my dear friends. This is episode 25 of a series of stories that I am doing to show my stubborn refusal to deal with my mental health in a correct and healthy and safe manner. But more than just a series of stories showing my stupidity, this is a series of stories showing God's incredible, immense, infinite patience and kindness and gentleness and mercy and grace and love in my life because of all my terrible choices I did and made and everything else. He still corrected me, and he still healed me, and he's given me an incredible life that I do not deserve. And I'm about to continue showing this life that he was creating in me. And by the time these stories are done, it will be a current day of where I am in my life right now, and it's just going to be it's a testament to just how truly incredible God is and how he can do the same for you, and he wants to. So, okay, I left off last time talking about being back in New York, being in my parents' neighborhood, and kind of getting overcome and overwhelmed by what have I done? Thing is that I could not put it off any longer. I needed to pull into my parents' driveway because, as I said, I've been in their neighborhood for a little bit, but I was struggling mightily to bring this journey to a close. I desperately did not want to face the next chapter of my life. However, I was also supremely curious to see how this next chapter would play out. Foolishly, because I'm pretty much a fool most of the time, I thought God would bring me through the withdrawals, get me cleaned up, and then send me on to the next thing with hardly any downtime. After all, I said to myself, he just allowed me to survive something extraordinarily. Clearly, he must have big plans for little old me. Yeah, well, let me tell you something. His ways are higher than my ways, and his thoughts than my thoughts. That's Isaiah 55:9. Because as the days stretched on into months and still nothing was changing, disillusionment set in. I was beginning to struggle with the choice of leaving my incredibly exciting life in Denver. This life in New York, it was so mind-numbingly boring and uneventful. Everything I assumed would happen once I got home and myself squared away, it did not happen. I thought I would have found a wife. I thought I would have gotten my path all set up career-wise. The madness also that was dulled by drugs, it returned in force, bringing with it the realization that I turned my back on the cure for what I was beginning to think was a very, very big mistake. At about the year mark, I made Galatians 6:9 my constant and daily complaint. That verse is, "And let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up." I was constantly hammering my sweet, precious, patient father for an explanation as to why this verse was not actuating in my life. I kept demanding to know why God was daring not to reward my obedience. Doesn't he see how obedient I've been? I wanted to know, again, foolishly, why God was ripping me off. Doesn't he see that I am growing weary? Where is this promised season of blessing? This is what I was saying to myself over and over again, and to my poor dear father, who, as I've already said, is incredibly patient with me. Because what he would do is he would look at me and say, "I don't know, Jeremy. Why don't you go ask God?" So I would, but stubbornly, I didn't get the answer I was looking for. The answers I got were, "Be still and know that I am God." That's Psalm 46:10. The other verse I would get, "With me, one day is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day. I am not slow to fulfill my promises, as some, i.e. you, count slowness." That's 2 Peter 3:8 and 9. And I added, i.e. you. But the point is, he's speaking those words to me because I was just completely confused. Yes, I know, I am purposely jumping ahead in the story to lay the groundwork of showing just how incredibly hard it was for me when I came home. Way harder than I ever expected. But being honest with myself, there was one thing that was missing, which made room for something else. It was something that made all the sadness and disappointment at how my quote-unquote triumphant return did not play out the way I thought it would. The constant war with God the last 3 years, it was over. My weapons had been put down. In its place was soothing and undeniable peace of the Creator of my soul. Though I experienced way more disappointments than I did successes for quite a long time after I came home, the peace that I felt with God, I'm telling you, it was worth it. It was absolutely worth the boredom and everything else that came with that first year or so of my time back home. Because the absence of the constant blinding agony of my accusing conscience was exhilarating. I was able to sleep again without guilt, and it was just amazing. But of all the specifics I do remember from Denver, the searing of my conscience is one of the most vivid. I remember feeling like a piece of me was cut off and I was suffering the phenomenon that many amputees experience, that phantom pain from where your limb used to be. I remember feeling that way when I was in Denver after I finally gave myself over to my sin. Because during my time in Denver, that pain, that phantom pain, it never fully went away. It was always my constant companion. The Holy Spirit, let me tell you, is infinitely powerful. He never ran out of ways to remind me that I was not living the life I was supposed to be living. But now, even though I was suffering through the agony of withdrawals, i.e. withdrawals from drugs and April and the constant rush of the lifestyle I was living, what I was experiencing was the peace with God, and that it was far more powerful than all the pain I was experiencing. I'll never forget the many times that I would sit in my car when I was still living in Denver and just kind of watch the planes just fly over Denver's giant skyline. I remember wistfully fantasizing about being in any one of those planes. Please just take me away and escape the pain and agony. That was quick. My throat already gone. By the way, as an aside, just right now, I don't know what is going on with my voice. I don't know if it's just I don't usually talk this much, or maybe it's just part of the repercussions of my sinful life of drugs. But anyway, I remember just thinking, I wish I could be in any one of those planes so that you could just take me away from this pain and agony that I was living in a day in and day out basis. I wanted so badly to get out of Denver, and I wanted to come home. I just didn't know how to. I felt so incredibly trapped. Well, God did finally bring me home. He did rescue me. He did dust me off, and he clothed me in new clothes, and he gave me a new lifestyle. But my sinful, selfish heart wasn't satisfied. I wanted more. I wanted a life, and I wanted a wife. I constantly was thinking, yeah, but what have you done for me lately, God? That's how I was for the first year. It's just so ridiculous. And I'm telling you, as each 24-hour period concluded, playing out nearly exactly as the previous 24 hours, I was getting restless and I was getting hopeless. Often, in my foolishness, I would fantasize about going back to Denver. Maybe April would take me back. Maybe she wouldn't. No matter, because I was going to pick up right where I left off, with or without her. But all praise to God, he would always course correct me. He would always lovingly and patiently turn my head this way and turn it away from the burning city that was behind me. And he would refocus my attention back onto him. He always gave me just enough to keep me moving forward because he did have plans for me. He did have a life, and he most definitely had a wife. The thing is, I needed to endure a whole lot of fiery trials to prepare for what he did have planned. because nobody escapes the consequences of their sins and choices. Society and this culture that we live in, they can play their little games of protecting people from the effects of shame. But let me tell you right now, and with no ambiguity, I wouldn't be here if I didn't sweat and toil under the weight of feeling ashamed. I am endlessly grateful that God allowed me that opportunity to be crushed underneath my shame. It created a strong desire to put in the effort to avoid letting my life get out of control like that ever again. Sadly, I will lose sight of those lessons that I learned when I first came back from Denver. And unfortunately, I would throw my life back in the toilet for about 4 to 5 months. But that's going to be several years later. That's down the road just a little bit. Trust me, we're going to get to that spot. But the great thing is about that period of my life is that, praise God, he put an end to my temporary insanity rather quickly. My insanity as in being stupid enough to rebel again. And then he quickly got me back on track. He got me back on track by lovingly allowing me to have a 3-night stay in a mental asylum. And this mental asylum, it was still up and running, not like the one that April and I snuck onto back in Denver. This was a very real experience, but, well, yes, we will get there. We will get there. So God knew that was coming because he was preparing me through the hardships that I was unexpectedly experiencing after I came back from Denver. Yes, that was a very, very lengthy introduction, but I really felt like it was necessary because when I did finally put my big boy pants on and pull into my parents' driveway, I was completely unprepared for the days and months ahead of me. But no problem. God was prepared. He was going to guide me through it all. So here I am in my parents' driveway. I get out and I walk up the driveway. I walk to the front door and I walk into the house. There's no fanfare. There's no tearful reunion. Nobody even heard me walk into the house. The thing is, they were expecting me a day before. And since I did not call as planned to have my dad pay for a hotel room, nor did I call them and let them know I was running a day late, I'm assuming they figured that I backed out and did not leave Denver. But there I am. I did walk away from Denver, and I am now standing in their house because when I did call out for my mom, and then when she did come to greet me, I feel like there was controlled relief in her eyes. I'm certain she was protecting herself from disappointment, but now that she saw me standing in her house, in her living room, finally home, the weight, it seemed to leave her shoulders. I could be dramatizing that, but that's kind of how I felt like the scene played out. I really appreciate how they handled my return. There was no drawn-out, overwrought display of relief or joy. I felt disgusting and ashamed. I felt like I didn't deserve to feel like a returning soldier from war. I was a vile reprobate who was living a putrid life of grotesque sin. I didn't want to feel celebrated. It was enough to know that they loved me and welcomed me home, but in reality, the real work of scrubbing the crusty, rancid filth off every square inch of my body, it was about to begin, and it needed to begin. And it'll begin in the next story, because once again, my wonderful uncle, that same uncle who hilariously and accidentally recorded over my childhood movie and also helped me get established in Denver, was unironically the one who helped me get established back home in New York. And that, as I've already alluded to, is going to begin in the next story. So, sip of water, and I'm going to wrap this up. I want to talk about shame. I want to talk about its effects. I want to talk about the power it can have over somebody who allows it to have its healing effects. Do not run from shame. Do not run from embarrassment. Embrace it, because of all of the lessons that life can teach us, shame is one of the most effective. Shame has the ability of staying with us because we're embarrassed and we don't want to feel that way again. God God put the power of shame into his creation because he knew what he was doing, because he knew that we as his humans, as his children, as the things that he created, we're constantly wandering off. Whether we are his true children, I'm talking about the children of his spiritual family, or just part of his creation, we all have wandering eyes. And God uses those wandering, the shame that comes from those wandering eyes to get the attention to him where it's supposed to be. And once he has our attention, that is when he does his most amazing and incredible work. I encourage you, whether you are part of his spiritual family or you are not, if you don't know what that means, I always say you can go to my website and check out any one of the links I have on there explaining what it means to be a part of God's family. If you have wandered off and you're now in the throes of shame, let it have its healing effect on you. Submit to it. Stop. Allow God to do what he needs to do and what he wants to do in your life. For those of you who are experiencing mental health issues, that's what a lot of this is the second part of the reason why I'm doing these stories. Shame and mental health is also a very effective tool, because I will get there in these stories, but I didn't want to experience that shame again of making all the wrong choices. I finally humbled myself and did get correct and appropriate mental health help that I needed. Please, I knew a friend of mine out here made a comment when I told him I'm doing these stories that men of today, unfortunately, have a really hard time admitting that they struggle with depression or any other the myriads of mental health problems, and they don't feel comfortable enough to be weak. It's not weak to admit that you need help. What's weak, and I mean weak as that's weak, is thinking you can do it on your own, thinking you can you can be just tough enough and do the old Clint Eastwood, John Wayne routine and just push yourself through, because you are damaging all manner of people in your life. I truly believe that the majority of the homeless people that we have in our country and in our world are due in part to people not dealing with their mental health correctly, and instead diving into a bottle or light up a crack pipe or whatever their choice is to survive their mental health. Enough of that. I'm going to close up. I'm going to actually let this be a little bit shorter than normal. So thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this. Come back for episode 26, when you'll see all the beginning of my healing of coming home. Thank you so much, my friends. Keep pressing on.